Of course, what she calls doodles is something I would probably never be able to draw, even if I tried. Please check out her unique works at brettisagirl.com and on Instagram at brettmanningart. Vance and Jen of the Caravan of Lore podcast sent me one of their Keeper of the Scrolls mystery boxes. The mystery box is a reward for being a Patreon. It included some Bachelor's Grove cemetery earth, a bleached bird skull, some sage, and some other goodies that I just won't mention because, well, some things have to be a surprise. Check their show out at caravanoflore.com and search for them on Patreon. Mr. Sam Sheeran also sent me a gift in the mail. I received both of his most recent prints, signed and dated. One is of H.P. Lovecraft, and the other of Edgar Allan Poe. And as I said in the post, when I received them, the detail in these is insane. And Mr. Sam, I disagree. I think they shouldn't be under glass because then it adds a glare. All of the detail needs to be seen. So those will be going up here in the office. These prints are available, amongst others, at mrsamsheeran.bigcartel.com. Into the Fray is now part of the KGRA Podcast Network. Live streams 24/7 of shows such as The Gralien Report, Expanded Perspectives, Open Minds UFO Radio, The Richard Dolan Show, and more. Into the Fray will be rebroadcast following Fade to Black with Jimmy Church at 1 a.m. every Friday. Visit kgrradio.com for a full list of shows. If you want more Into the Fray, extra episodes, more creepy encounter stories, videos, early release of Thursday episodes, and more, visit intothefrayradio.com and click Become an Insider. There are a couple different options for you to choose from, and this will give you instant access to all premium content. If you have yet to do so, please consider going into your podcatcher and leaving a rating and a review. Helps other people like us find the show. And of course, by like us, I mean weird and into weird things. That's a compliment, by the way. You can find me on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You can join the interactive group on Facebook. Just search Into the Fray. Have a question or a story to share? Contact me through my website or by email, shannon@intothefrayradio.com. Or you can always call the hotline. Can always be anonymous. 844-866-3366. If you need more than the 5 minutes allotted, just call right back and pick up where you left off. As always, thank you for any support you give the show, whether it be monetary, any shares, or even just telling your friends about the show. It all helps. And now, to Ian Gibbs and Victoria's Most Haunted. Yeah, I mean, I've heard every episode of the Ghost Story Guys. Now, I'm all caught up, and one of the things that I think the first time I died laughing was Brennan kept bringing up his book, and of course everyone knows that Brennan, if you haven't listened to it, was on episode 71 about his book, A Strange Little Place, and he would bring up his book, A Strange Little Place, on the Ghost Story Guys, your podcast, and then he would start to mention something about your book, but then he would bleep out the title.
Yep.
And
Yeah.
I died laughing because it would happen a couple of times in one episode.
Yeah. And when he finally did meet Tori, who works for my publishing place, he made it into the whole thing with the predator noise, and she loved that. She thought that was hilarious. So,
Oh,
yeah,
man.
he's a funny guy. He is a funny guy.
Yeah, I just thought this is one of the funniest things I've heard in a long time because he kept mentioning where to find A Strange Little Place, about Revelstoke, Canada, and then oh yeah, Ian, you wrote a book too. It's beep, and you're like, oh sweet Lord, that is hilarious stuff right there. I love it. Yeah,
good times.
Absolutely. Yeah, so Ghost Story Guys is the podcast, but of course this evening we are going to be talking about your book, Victoria's Most Haunted, Ghost Stories from BC's Historic Capital City. And one of the things, before we even get into the book, you were born in England. Where in England were you born?
I was born in Leicestershire, in the Midlands.
Okay. So middle of England, I'm assuming that's what that means, right? Yeah. Is that, do you know where Suffolk County and Lakenheath is? I'm not quite sure where the Midlands would be
I know where
relation.
Suffolk is. Yeah, Suffolk's more towards the, what do you call it? More towards the ocean, I believe.
Yeah. I mean, I haven't even been back there, so that's on my list.
Right.
But do you ever get back there or go on any?
Yeah, I was just there last summer, and I really focused on doing the touristy things because, like, I'm also adopted, so my biological family is all there. So it's actually worth it for me to go back. I stay with a sister and a half sister, and see all the grandparents who are miraculously still alive.
Wow.
All in their 90s, all living in their own homes. My one grandmother still runs the bell ringing at her church, and my grandfather he's a restoration carpenter. And I joke that it's because he actually remembers when those homes were built in the 1700s. But he does a lot of work, and he's so funny because he does it because he loves it. And he says all these people will come out there and buy these really old homes, and they'll ask him to do something, and he'll go and look. And he says if they're really awful, he just doubles his estimate because he goes, either that means I'm not going to have to do the job, or I'll do the job, but they pay me the pompous tax or whatever.
Yes.
So, it's pretty great. They're cool people.
I love your point of, something from the 1700s. You're like, you actually saw the original piece, so you know what you need to restore it to.
Exactly. And it was so funny because here in Victoria, I lived in a 100-year-old house, and around here it's like, 100 years. In England, they're like, yeah, my garden shed's 200 years old. Like, 100. Give me a break. 1700s, then they're starting to get impressed. But 100 years old, please. So it's kind of a cultural mindset thing. You kind of have to adjust yourself to.
So any ghost stories from your family over in the old country there, England?
Funny. Well, yeah, actually, two. The house I began life in, I was 4 years old when we immigrated to Canada. I used to see a man peer down at me from the attic, and I would tell my mom, and she would tell me, no, don't be silly. You're being, you're lying or you're imagining it. But I would see him a couple times a week. He would just peer over the edge, and sometimes he'd smile at me, or sometimes he'd just stare at me, and it freaked me out. I slept with the covers over my head until I was 12.
Hell no. Why does he have to smile at you?
Yeah, well, I don't know. Was he being friendly or freaking? I don't know. It wasn't cool. But the other one was interesting. Staying with my half-sister. She lives just north of London in a very beautiful home. They actually took two homes and built them together. And we were in the house, and we were in a different wing of the house. And I came downstairs one morning, and I said, so, what's upstairs? And she looked at me, and she goes, did you see the lady? And I was like, damn it, I knew I was right. And I'm like, so tell me what's going on. And she said when they were building the homes together to be one house, the oven, the gas stove would turn on all the time. The fan on the gas stove would turn on all the time, to the point where they actually had to flip the breaker because they would come home and it would be on full blast. And one night, her daughter, who was around 7 or 8 at the time, had a friend sleeping over. And she told them, go upstairs, go to bed. It's really late. They'd been in London all day, and it was really late getting back. She said, go up and go to bed, and I'm going to come up, and tuck you guys in. And she got up to the top of the stairs, and she saw a figure pass across the hallway to that other wing of the house. And she's like, oh, those girls, they're not in bed, and I can't believe this. She goes marching down there, turns right to go down to her daughter's room, opens her daughter's room's door. Both girls were asleep. Like completely. She's like, oh. So she believes it was because it was a mother and father lived in the one house, and their daughter and her husband lived in the other house. And so the mother actually did die in the other house, which is the wing where her daughter's bedroom is. So she's pretty sure it's the old lady who's come back. And her daughter said to her one night, Mom, she was 4 at the time. She said, Mom, is it you who comes in and strokes my hair every night?
Oh, boy.
And she didn't want to freak her out. So she went, yeah.
Yeah.
And then when her daughter was 10, she said to her mom, out of the blue, she goes, Mom, you know how you stroke my hair every night? And my sister said, yeah. And she goes, I know it's not really you, it's the old lady.
Oh, boy.
Wow.
So do you, all right, so that's not such, that strikes out my question I was forming, because that's not residual at all. If she's stroking the old hairdo there. Yeah, but was she ever seen in, so there was 2 houses and the other one was attached to the older one. Was she ever seen in that other part where when she was alive that wasn't even part of her house?
No, you never see her in the midsection. She's either in the one house or in the other. They never see her in the section that connects the 2 homes.
That's fascinating.
Yeah, isn't that cool?
Now, what about your guy in the attic? Do you know anything about the history with that, possibly?
No, because I was 4 when we left.
Mm-hmm.
And, of course, I was being told it wasn't happening anyway. That I really didn't. I have no idea. And the home wasn't that old. It was built in the 40s. And this I was born in 72, so this would have been kind of 74.
Mm-hmm.
And no, nothing. I didn't hear anything. My mom did say to me later that she thought there was something in there too. But this is much, much later.
Oh, that's cool. She did end up admitting something, huh?
She did. So that was actually helpful.
And also helpful that he never creeped down out of the attic, huh?
No, very helpful.
At least there was that. You're like, you stay up there. We're cool.
Absolutely. You stay where you are. I'll stay where I am.
Oh, man. That's like every kid's worst nightmare. That's like a horror movie come to life. Something just peeking out of the... It's always like the attic or the basement. You're like, really?
I had no context for this. And then, I was 4. I didn't have any ghost stories. I didn't know anything about it. All I knew was this man was up there. And sometimes I would dream about him chasing me. I remember dreams. But yeah, I slept with the covers over my head till I was 12. That just... because it was so real, and things, sometimes it felt like things were coming into my room or passing through my room, and just sleeping with the covers over my head was just the easier thing to do. It got really warm. It just felt like the thing to do for sure.
It's funny how we think that a little sheet will just protect you from whatever, but just a little mental stillness is all it takes sometimes, and at least you can get a little bit of sleep and not go completely insane on top of seeing the man in the attic and not having sleep.
Exactly. Yeah, it definitely seemed to help.
Now, another thing that you guys brought up on an episode of the Ghost Story Guys was some of your early experiences in New Brunswick, and I don't want to, beat it all out of you so that people can go listen to this themselves and some of the details, but there was like a phantom car, and then one of the most cool parts of the story was you guys kept having someone walk up the stairs, and then wouldn't they stop like midpoint, and then you found out that that's where she actually died, like a violent death or something, right?
Yeah, that's right. And that was probably, that really pushed me over the edge of thinking things were interesting and kind of cool and I could sense things, to actually living through it, living in a haunted house. And it isn't what you think it's going to be. Your mind does a very good job of protecting you from it. And so it took quite a while before I began to put all the weird things that were happening all in the same place.
Yeah.
And we were even kind of acknowledging these weird things were happening, but it's not a big deal. It doesn't really mean anything. Like looking back, it just seems ridiculous. But I get it now. And now when people tell me, I live in a haunted house or I have something in my house, I'm like, tell me what that's like for you. Because it's not like the movies. Yes, there is a slow build, but you don't necessarily put everything together all at the same time. It's interesting.
Well, yeah, and you guys kind of boogied out of there pretty quickly, right?
Oh, yeah. We forfeited our last month's rent just to get out because it wasn't good. It was, I think we were in the house maybe 6 weeks.
Yeah. I mean,
not long.
And that's saying a lot because you've already had some experiences, obviously, which we just touched on. And for you guys to be like, no, we're out. And I think you guys had just gotten married. And I'm sure that, you're just trying to pull it all together. And, a couple kids just getting out there and doing your thing. And that says a lot if after 6 weeks you're like, yeah, we're gone. We're out of here.
We're gone. Things got a lot more angry, it felt like. Yeah. And the last thing was the giant crash that shook the house, and it was like, okay, it's time. It's not little doors opening and closing and footsteps pitter-pattering about. It freaked us both out.
I forgot about that part. Yeah, how do you even begin to explain something like that, right? Like, you can try, but until you've been through it, there's no way to quantify that.
No, and I even walked around the house looking for a tree branch, but of course there were no trees close enough to the house. I checked all the other bedrooms. I went up in the attic. Did something fall over? Nothing was moved. It was one of the most. But at the time that crash happened, like it shook the house. It was an older wooden home. It shook the house so bad a glass fell off the nightstand and smashed on the floor. And I was looking at my wife, going, "You want to go check that out?" And she goes, "No." And I said, "Well, me either." And she goes, "Let's go to sleep." And I said, "Okay." And we did. We literally shut our eyes and went to sleep, because it's almost like a paralysis thing. You don't know what to do.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, well, this is what we're dealing with. We seem to be safe right now. Let's just go to sleep. And we did.
See, but you hear that a lot. And even if someone's like camping in a tent in the middle of the woods and they think they have freaking Bigfoot right outside their tent door and it's like throwing rocks or screaming, it's like the body just goes, you got to shut down. And you can be listening to a podcast and go, how the hell did you go to sleep? But you hear that all the time.
It's the weirdest feeling. It's you don't know what else to do. I mean, what are your alternatives?
Run screaming from the house in your jammies, I guess.
Yeah, but then you got to deal with things.
Right, exactly. Then it really is really real. If you can't go to sleep, then you're screwed.
Then you're showing up at a motel in your pajamas, and you have to actually acknowledge it's real. And I think that was part of the delay with the haunted house thing, was the delay of kind of putting it all together was exactly that. It was, if we acknowledge this, if we actually talk about it, well, then it's real.
That's why I think when you move into a new house and you're not quite sure about what's going on there, sleep in your jammies, at least for a little while, to make sure nothing's going on. Because God forbid you got to book it outside just butt naked.
Definitely.
Yeah, just in case, you know.
It should be in one of those move-in brochures for new homeowners.
Ghost underwear.
Yeah.
It's the just in cases. Yeah.
Have a ghost go back.
Well, they have the tearaway stuff, so they need to have something just as quick that you can put like magnetic underwear. Or, I don't know. We could come up with something.
I love
I'm sure.
That. Yeah.
Hey, Brennan's good at coming up with this stuff. Yeah. Just roll out of bed and just like clink, and just
it's on you, and you're good to go.
It's like the chastity belt from well, you know what I'm saying, the Men in Tights, Yeah. Just run right out of the house. No screaming needed. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the ghostly walks in Victoria, which is another, obviously, a passion of yours, because it sounds like you guys are about to get really, really busy. So tell people all about the ghostly walks and what's going on there.
Yeah, I mean, the ghost walks are pretty cool. We do a 90-minute walk. In the summer, we do it twice a night. We do it at 7:30 and 9:30. The 7:30 one is different every night of the week. So we have 7 different walks, or 8 different walks altogether. So 7 walks are different on the weeknights, and then we have the one kind of, we call it the classic route at 9:30. It's pretty cool. Halloween, we mix it up a bit, and we sort of mix up all the routes, and we do a 90-minute walk, and that gets busy. We do that one 4 times a night for the 2 weeks leading up to Halloween. So I just sort of don't even worry about sleeping, because I'm working all day and then going and do the ghost walk. But it's a lot of fun. The walks are really great, and it's nice because there's enough history mixed in with storytelling, mixed in with the ghosts, that people, even if you're not into ghosts, you're going to get something out of it, right? So it's fun. we don't do the jump scares or have people hiding in bushes or
no clowns popping out of bushes with red balloons.
No, because then I'd pee my pants and run away, and that
right.
would work. So no, this way it's just kind of a nice walk, 90-minute walk. We do a downtown route, and yeah, it's a lot of fun. I love ghost stories. I've always loved ghost stories. So this combined with a natural ability to show off, and I'm golden.
Yeah, and you mix in ghosts, and it's like, oh, this is perfect. Yeah, I was wondering, that was one of the things I was going to ask you. I was like, he works all day, and then he's got these walks, and I heard you guys saying it was going to go to like 2 a night. I'm like, what did these men sleep ever?
It goes from, I usually get to work around 8, and then I'm done at 4, and then ghost walks, we start up at 7, and it runs to 11.
Wow.
So, yeah, so I did scale it back this summer for August. I'm like, I just do one a week because it's killing me.
Yeah.
And that's cool. And then for the Halloween walks, I've asked, sort of begged, to do the earlier set. So those start at 6:30. So I'll do one at 6:30 and one at 8:30, and I'll be done at 10. So that's actually a lot easier for me. So, but yeah, it's great. It's a lot of fun. I love doing it. I do private ones sometimes through the company. If people want to take their own group, they can ask for me, and then I take them on a ghost walk. So yeah, it's fun. It's really fun.
Very cool. I would love to get out there sometime and do that.
You need to, and you're in Vegas, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, you couldn't get much more different from Vegas than up here. So
that's right up my alley. Then it really is. Sometimes I'm like,
really
it's
green,
really strange
really
that I'm here. Yeah. Another thing that I jotted down, and it's specifically for the ghost walks, is how many stories come across your ears from people. Maybe they don't have to do with the actual properties that you're going to, but just maybe their own personal ghost stories.
Yeah. I would say at least 1 or 2 every single time I do a walk.
Wow.
And I think part of it is when you're sharing with them, they feel compelled. It's sort of a storytelling thing where people feel compelled to give back.
Yeah.
When the main source of entertainment was you sat around the fire and you each told stories. It was like you were bringing a gift to the fire, to the community. And I really do see kind of echoes of that with people where you'll be telling them ghost stories, and at the end they just have to tell you what their experience was. And they usually qualify it with, oh, I know it's not very good, or, I know it wasn't exciting, or it wasn't as good as your stories. And I always say to them, no, you've had this experience. That is awesome. Like, that's really great. And thank you for sharing it with me, because I love to hear them. But yeah, I would say at least once a walk, people, and sometimes when you're moving from location to location, they'll be like, oh, I was going to tell you, and then they'll tell you something, right. And it's pretty neat. It's pretty cool.
What's the time between one location to another? How much time do you have with these folks?
Oh, it depends. I mean, some of them are literally around a corner, and others are up a block or two. So some of them are very, very quick. You've got like a couple minutes. Other ones are like 3 or 4 minutes. So people definitely find a way, though.
That's really cool. It's like a whole nother podcast in the making, just live from the ghost walks. That's neat.
Totally. Yeah, that'd be really cool, actually.
Yeah, I could see where it's just a time where people feel like, okay, well, this is really setting the mood here. So, like you said, just that environment of sharing. That's more than I thought it was going to be. I thought, he probably gets a couple a week, but 1 or 2 each walk.
Yeah, and like I say, even if they're just short a lot of times at the beginning of the ghost walk, people will be like, oh, this happened to me, or my mother was able to, or, things like that. We get a lot of that as we're waiting for people to come. So, yeah, it's interesting when it happens, and I never know what provokes it, but it just is, it's kind of cool that it happens. It's like they're giving you a little bit of a gift there. So, yeah, it's neat. And we end the walk in a haunted room. And each of the guides, I would say almost every single one of us, has stories about what's happened in that room. I hate being in there by myself. So that certainly you end it there too, right?
Nice. Now, okay, so how many, I know of a few because you mention it in your book, but how many are actually on the tour that are in the book?
I would say... Well, it depends which walk you go on, right? That's part of it.
Right.
Because each one has different stories. But I would say over half the stories are in the book that are on the tour.
Nice.
Yeah. Each guide does a different kind of interpretation almost. Like mine are, I'm pretty fast paced and I throw in some jokes. If the group is cool with that, you can usually tell in the first story. Other guides are amazing, dramatic storytellers, and they're just incredible at it. And people just stand there kind of mesmerized because they're so good at it. And so each of us have our own kind of different style of doing it, but the stories are essentially, the same stories. It's just different deliveries.
I saw a picture that you posted of a kid that went on a ghost walk, and he also listens to you and Brennan's podcast, The Ghost Story Guys. And I remember you guys saying, like, Brennan was like, "Oh, sweet Jesus, a kid listens to this show."
Big time.
I thought it was hilarious.
He was really sweet. His dad set that up for him. So his dad was messaging us as they were driving across Canada. And then Brennan had to be away and said, "Can you be there?" And I'm like, "Absolutely." So that was really cool.
That is very cool. Yeah, I felt like that on an occasion when someone writes in, they're like, "Oh, my daughter listens," or "My son listens," and I'm like, "How old is your child?" I'm a little better now. I try to be a little more behaved. I think it's easier now that me and Sam and Orion don't get on and act like, we're just having a regular conversation, which that's what it was. Right. And there's nothing wrong with that. But sometimes you just get this gut check like, oh, my God, what did I say, though? I forget.
Yeah. There you go.
I forget. That's when the bleeping comes in, which I never did learn how to utilize. Whoopsie.
Yeah, definitely. Well, Brennan was an early adopter of that. That's for sure.
It almost makes it funnier, though. I think it's funnier when you don't hear the word and there is a beep, because you know what is said. It's funny that way. Perfect. I don't know.
I agree.
And then you can put the nice general rating on iTunes and all that. You don't have to put explicit, which is also a positive. Mm-hmm.
Well, it depends on your audience, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I didn't bring Into the Fray out thinking that, it's a kiddie show, that's for sure. But I guess none of us did. But sometimes you're like, oh, God, your kid listens. Oh, sweet Lord.
I know. And then you kind of double check yourself, like, what did I say?
Yeah, because sometimes I'm like, well, I wouldn't let my daughter listen to it. I was just, it's just a little salty language, just a little pirate language, but I don't talk like that in front of her, so I wouldn't want to talk like that in front of anyone else's kid either.
Exactly. But hey, everyone parents the way they want to parent.
Very true. And sometimes I do let my kid watch like Paranormal Witness, or she loves Ghost Adventures. Sorry, everybody, but she does. Probably because Zach he's slightly attractive. That's probably why.
I was just saying, the one show I really like, and it's a total guilty pleasure. Have you seen The Dead Files?
Oh, yes. Yes.
It is so formulaic. I can't get enough of it. I love it.
Yeah, I'm all on board for that. Yeah, though the first time, this was very recently, that I realized, oh my gosh, my daughter is growing up a little bit, and she's going to be 10, so I guess 10 going on 16. I don't know. We were watching Speed, like Speed with Keanu Reeves, like old school.
Yes, yeah, remember that one? Yeah.
Just out of the blue, she just goes, "Gosh, she's really cute," and I'm like, "Oh God, what did you just say?" How dare you? Go back
no,
to being a kid. Yeah, I'm like, stop it right now.
It's a downhill thing from here.
It really is. I'm like, well, I guess I'll just have to be recording more shows more often, and then when she doesn't want to hang out with me anymore, I'll record even more shows because Mom won't be cool anymore. That's coming too. That's
the way it's going. I hate to tell it to you.
Oh yeah. Yeah, once Keanu is like, she's saying that out loud, I'm like, I'm screwed.
Yeah.
And I couldn't disagree with her. I'm like, well, yeah, he is an attractive man,
But when she's 25, you'll be friends again. Don't worry.
Yeah, it'll only take about 10 years after it gets to that really like slamming door point, and I suck to all hell. It'll be about 10 years later, we're good to go.
Exactly. You already got it planned out.
Yeah. Yeah. I can just spend a lot of time on Into the Fray when she's in her room, not wanting to talk to her uncool mother. Okay, sorry. I'm digressing hugely. I'm sorry. Yeah. Let's leave Keanu in the dust here. Okay. So, Victoria itself, let's talk a little bit about that because your intro is so cool. And I was like highlighting like a mad woman because there were so many cool facts. And it sits on basalt and it's an island. There's ley lines and Native American wars. I mean, all of these factors are converging to which even just one of those factors, a lot of times you hear is a contributing situation to any ghostly energy, and it holds energy.
And I don't even have a part in there, and I learned this afterwards. I didn't even think about it. We're also in Victoria, surrounded by mountains. We have the mountains to the south of us, which are the Olympics in Washington State, and we are surrounded. We are literally in this weird kind of basin of mountains. There's even a mountain stopping us from getting to the rest of Vancouver Island. We have to go over this mountain to get to the rest of Vancouver Island. So we are literally in this weird bedrock-ready, energy-sucking, saltwater-surrounded mountain bowl. So just even those simple physical things is going to be enough, as you said, to make it kind of haunted or paranormally or give the energy a real boost. And then you layer over the historical stuff with the First Nations people and with the Gold Rush people, and this was a rough town. This was not the pretty little tea-drinking, hanging basket full of flowers place it is now. It was a rough place.
Yeah. It sounded more like a tombstone on its worst day, you know, just people getting massacred.
Absolutely. There was a lot of people came here and just never went home. And in those days, in the 1800s, 1860s, you know, if you went to seek your fortune and didn't come home, you know, if you liked the person, it was because they struck it rich and became successful. If you didn't like the person, well, they probably died, right? So, but anyway, you didn't really count on ever seeing them again anyway. It was just not the connected world we're in now. So people left, and then people moved to Victoria, and then they might be gone the next week, and nobody would have batted an eye because this is a very transient place to be as well.
It seems like such a gorgeous place, though. I mean, when you're, you know, all the mountains, all the water, it's so picturesque, and you don't think of it being a dark and sinister place where many people died, but that's just the facts.
Well, yeah, and I mean, it is gorgeous. I've looked across Canada, and this is definitely the prettiest place I've ever lived, and which is why I'm still here. But it was definitely a rough place. I mean, Vancouver was a couple of muddy shacks by the river, right? Victoria was the place to be. It was the party town as well, and it was a free port. You could bring goods in here tax free. So it just was the perfect storm of history and geography and all those kinds of things that made it a really, it was primed, you know, in a way. It was just primed.
Yeah, is there any tales of anyone bringing in, you know, we're not exactly sure what's going on at Oak Island, but any treasure being buried and people being killed over things like that?
Not that I know of. I mean, I know there was a bunch of illegal stills here, and the police raided one of them, and they found 4 women and 6 fellow police officers running the still. Whoops, yeah, that whole Law and Order thing. Opium was really big. There was a lot of opium going through here. Opium was legal but heavily taxed a couple hundred years ago, but it was still a lucrative high-stakes business, so you can bet people went, you know, kind of disappearing around the opium trade.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, there's definitely a lot of money flowing through here. Of course, gold was big, but no, there's no specific thing about, you know, buried treasure or anything like that. That would be really cool, but no, they were more here to get goods through. Get what they could out of the land.
Well, let's jump in then. And actually, I asked another story because I'm like, I'm just giving away too much of this book. I just can't do it. So, because I've listened, like I said, to every episode of your podcast. And when Brennan finally interviewed you and gave you the attention that your book deserved, instead of bleeping it out, you got a whole episode. So at least he made up for it there. Yeah. I realized how in-depth I was going, and I'm like, I'm going to cut this back because I'm going to follow more Brennan's vein. There's still plenty. Don't worry, everybody. But I'm like, I gotta save some surprises for everyone when they get the book. So let's talk about Deadman's Point, and this is the inn at Laurel Point. And I like this one because, like we just mentioned, with the whole Native American side of it, and the sky burials, which I was a little I was unfamiliar with that. So cool story.
Well, the Tibetans do it as well. The monks do it, but in a different way. They just leave the body out to be basically consumed by nature. But they leave it out on a high mountain rock and let the birds and the weather and everything, kind of take the body. And they call that sky burial as well. So, but it's the same idea. They would leave the body out to the elements, and then they would put the bones into a cedar basket or cedar box and put it high up into the branches of the trees. So, yeah, very much the same idea, really.
Yeah, as I started to read that, and I'll have you just touch on a little bit what this story was, but when Jacob Seal, is that how you say his name? Seal?
Yeah.
When Jacob Seal moved in there, boy, he kind of messed things up over there. So.
Well, is it ever a good idea to mess with the First Nations graveyard?
No, never. I mean, I've never heard of a good situation
coming
out of that. Yeah, it's like 101. You're like, dude, stop. What the heck are you doing?
Exactly. So, yeah, they kind of buggered that up. He came here from Germany and was going to build a furniture factory. So the first thing he needed to do, he found a plot of land called Deadman's Point, hired a bunch of guys to come in and clear the trees. As they began clearing them, these boxes and baskets of bones came tumbling out of the trees onto the ground, and the men stopped and said, what do we do? And he was like, don't worry about it, put them all in a big pile. And when they were done with them, they burnt them. And anything that didn't burn, they just shoved into the ocean. So, yeah, not so good. And then a little while later, he was asleep in his house and woke up to discover that not only was his house very much on fire, his factory was also burning. His factory that was over, a half mile away, was also on fire at the exact same time. And so he and his wife got out of the house. She did not fare very well with this mentally. She couldn't handle it. She kind of came undone, and talked about the firemen who were rubbing their hands on the walls and in the curtains to make the fire burn even quicker. And she was eventually strapped to a bed in a friend's house because she wouldn't stop ranting about it, and ended up dying of fright. One of the few people ever had that put on a death certificate. So not good. And then it took 30 years for the land to sell. Surprise. And then Mr. William Pendray bought it, and he wanted to build a paint factory. And he wasn't all that fussed about First Nations curses. He didn't really believe in that kind of thing. But he was, rightfully so, concerned about fire. And he put in this pretty intense early 1900s fire suppression system, which consisted of these large cast iron pipes that ran along the roof, all over the roof, and you turned a handle and seawater would be pumped up into it and spray down. And the factory was just about finished, and he was walking through it, looking at everything and making sure everything was okay. And then there was a loud wrenching sound, and one of the pipes just came straight down and hit him squarely in the head. So that was the end of poor Mr. Pendray. His son then took over. His son Ernest took over, who loved riding fast in his carriage. And he
love that part, by the way. You're like, what young man doesn't like a fast carriage?
Exactly. And he even had steel put on the wheels.
Oh.
He rimmed the wheels with steel so they could cut through the ground quicker. Well, that turned out to be his undoing, because the horse ran up to the gate at the factory and stopped very suddenly, like it had been spooked. And he was thrown out of the carriage, and then the horse took off again, and the wheel went over his neck, unfortunately, and his head was separated from his body, or separated from his head, depending on which side you're standing on.
Right.
So, yeah, not great. And their home is still there. Their home is just a little ways down from where the factory was, and it's still there. It's actually been incorporated into a hotel chain now. It's called Gatsby Mansion. It's actually the Pendray House, but they call it the Gatsby Mansion. And you can stay in the master bedroom, where more than often than not, people will be woken up feeling very strange, and then there's sort of this weird green light in the room, and then they wake up and there's Mr. Pendray and his son's head basically floating over the bed, looking at you, trying to figure out what you're doing. So, yeah, not the best for a quiet night's sleep, but there you go.
Yeah, what's worse, seeing just the head or the headless body? I don't know which one would be worse.
Exactly. And I mean, now the land is a little more calmed down. It's not as bad as it used to be. Apparently the spirits aren't as murderous, but they do have some simple rules in place for the cleaning staff. They don't ever have to clean a room on their own. They can always do it in pairs.
Wow.
There's a lot of weird things that happen, and the cleaning staff were getting freaked out. So they did this rule. Things seem to have been calmed down a bit, but it's a very dark place. Like I've been there personally, and it feels shadowy, even though it has a lot of light. It's really odd. And they have weird things that happen in the dining room with, wine glasses coming off the tables and, silverware going flying by itself. So, yeah, they're still there. The shadow figures are definitely still there, but they seem to, maybe they know these people didn't have anything to do with it. I don't know, but it's definitely not a very settled place. And obviously they changed the name from Deadman's Point to Laurel Point. I mean, I would too.
Yeah, you can't blame them there, especially after those folks just shoving the bones in the ocean and or burning them. That's terrible.
Yes.
I don't know anybody really who would think that was a good idea. I mean, that's some money-hungry folks right there. Just get this thing built.
Well, but in the 1800s, I mean, the First Nations people were seen as, one step above bears. Do you know what I mean?
That's true. Yeah.
As human beings, as awful as that it sounds now, they were just an inconvenience to be dealt with. And historically, they bumped them off the piece of land where the legislature is, and they put them over where the garbage dump was. And then they bumped them off the garbage dump because they decided they wanted that. They pushed them further inland, and they just kept, basically, whenever they would settle, they'd be like, no, we want that part. And, they'd bump them further in. So, I mean, the First Nations people really didn't have a chance to protect themselves.
You know what part I also found fascinating in this story was the fact that, and I thought something else was going to happen, but the First Nations people, or at least a scout or whatever you want to call it, actually saw them doing this. And I thought, oh boy, he's going to go rally the troops and these folks are going to get, they're going to get beheaded or they're going to end up like bones. But instead, they're like, oh, you guys just started a shitstorm, so we're going to get out of here. So they actually kind of cleared out the area. That is the exact opposite of what I was thinking was going to happen.
Well, I think by that point in history, they knew they couldn't fight them. Also, it was sort of like you didn't mess with the dead because you would be cursed.
Yeah.
And they saw it. And I mean, it would be like walking up to someone in the woods playing with a big stack of dynamite and throwing matches at the dynamite. That's how I think they saw it.
Right.
And they went, oh, damn. Like, this is getting off. We are out of here.
Like, you guys are screwed. Peace.
Exactly. And when the chief sent the scout around, it was to find out, like, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? And the scout coming back and saying, it's pure ignorance. They have no idea what they're doing. They honestly don't know what they're doing. And I could see that being far more dangerous than if the white man went in there to burn it all out because they were making a point, or they wanted to harness the powers of the dead, or I don't know, some other movie script idea you could do. But realistically, they're like, dum-de-dum-dum-dum. We're just going to mow down the trees and build us a factory. Yeah. And I think that was at the point where the First Nations were like, oh, yeah, no, we're out.
You mentioned how when you went there, it felt really dark, and it's something that I meant to bring up in the beginning, but you kind of have what you call your spidey sense. And this is one of the stories that I decided not to really cover, but I wanted to bring this part up. And this was the home on Elk Lane or Lake. I'm sorry, I can't read my own writing.
Oh, yeah, Lake.
Yeah, Elk Lake Drive. You brought up to the owner the fact that you could see a farmhouse down by some trees, and she was flabbergasted, and she's like, how did you know that? Yes, there was a farmhouse down there by the trees.
Yeah. I mean, that's when I was in my 20s. I met a couple other people who could do the same thing, and that was really freeing because that told me that, okay, I'm not crazy, this is a thing. And when that happened, I kind of thought, okay, I need to, use this or make it stronger or something. And that's when I first started to get, I don't know how to describe it. I say it's like having a bunch of pictures shoved to the back of my head. That I just see things that I know aren't from me, but I know they're from somewhere else. And so when I walked out on her back deck and I'm like, is there a creek in those woods? And she was like, yeah. And it's because I got a picture of the creek. And then way further up in the forest, I could see a house. And it was a farmhouse. It was very clear. And I said, and is there a farmhouse? And she goes, yeah, the foundations for the old farmhouse are in the woods. And that's when I knew what it was. It was really super clear that it was this farmer who, it was his land. He didn't give a flying crap about the townhomes that were built on his land. He just wanted everyone to know it was his land. So that was really cool for me because that was, in that particular instance, I remember walking through the whole house going, I don't feel anything.
Mm-hmm.
And being a little bit unsettled by that because there was just nothing. It was completely a dead zone. There's just nothing there. But as soon as I stepped down on that back deck, and something pushed me toward, not physically, but something was compelling me to go to that back deck. And as soon as I stood on the deck, it was like boom, 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 boom. And it all popped into my head. And I'm like, oh, it's not the house. It's the land. I wasn't thinking big enough. I was thinking her townhome had a problem, but it wasn't. It was the entire complex was on his land and was affected by what was going on. Yeah, it was pretty wild.
I mean, is this something that you have to be on location, or can you do this almost like a remote viewer can do anywhere, over the country or over the world?
Yeah, no, it's interesting you say that. I had an experience a number of years ago when I was living in Winnipeg, and a really good friend of mine, we've been friends since grade 8, we're still good friends, she called me. She and I had experienced some stuff in a rental home her parents had back when we were in high school, and we had that experience together. And she called me, and she's like, I think I need your help. And I'm like, what's going on? And she told me how she just moved into a condo, a 2-bedroom condo. She was renting the room from her friend. Her friend had bought the condo. And they were having these weird things happen. The water would turn on by itself in the kitchen. The lights would go on and off. Doors would slam. And as she's telling me this, I'm getting pictures. And keep in mind, I'm in Winnipeg on the phone to someone who's in Calgary, which is about a 18-hour drive. It's a fair distance. And I said to her, and she didn't tell me, all she told me was a 2-bedroom condo. And I said, if you look at the balcony door, the patio door, do you see the two rivers in Calgary meet out that side? Mm. And she was like, yeah. And I said, and I got a whole picture of it, and I said, you need to talk to the building super or the manager or somebody. They have something to do with this. But what I'm seeing is there's a man in a recliner, kitty corner, right by the patio doors, facing in from there. He's in a brown suit. He's old, and he's deceased. And I think it's him. I said he was super religious. And I said, and I know you, and I know you and your friends like to go to the bar, and I know how you dress. Oh, total whore. And so I'm thinking that, you know what, he's upset by this because he thinks of you as his guests. He feels responsible for you. Yeah. And when you guys dress like this, it really upsets him. I said, so if you're going to go to the bar, change at work or change somewhere else. Don't change there. And I think things are going to settle down if you do that. So she's like, okay, I'll check it out. So she called me back about 3 weeks later, and she's like, okay, so the man in the chair, that's confirmed. He was really good friends with the superintendent of the building, and they used to have dinner every Sunday night. He would go to church, dressed in his suit, come home, have a nap, and then he would go and have dinner with his friend, the super of the building. And it was the super who found him because he didn't show up for dinner. So, and then found him in a corner in a brown recliner in his brown suit. I'm like, oh my God.
Holy smokes.
Know. It's never happened to me before. So it turned out everything I said was right. And sure enough, they stopped dressing, like tramps. And
you're like coughing.
Yeah, yeah, no. So it's suddenly that, and the best part is my friend totally wouldn't mind me saying that, but she appreciates advertising. No, I'm kidding. But everything I'd said was right, and for years this baffled me because I didn't understand how that worked, and I was talking to someone who I have a lot of respect for, who is very much able to do this kind of thing as a full-on medium, all that kind of stuff. And I said, I don't understand. I wasn't even in the same city. And she goes, no, but you have a connection with that person. She goes, energy isn't bound by distance and time and geography and all that. Energy flows where it can find a channel, and you and your friend have a strong connection. And so that energy was able to flow through her to you. And I was just like, wow, that's cool. So that was really neat. That was really neat.
I mean, you even described the view out her balcony, and you'd never been there.
I didn't even know where the building was.
Oh,
but
my gosh.
I could see the one river coming up, and then the other river coming in, and then both of them curving off to the right. I could see it as clear as day. It was so weird. And this was before Google Earth or cell phone, anything. Like, there was just no way I could have known that. It was really neat. But again, like, that kind of freaked me out because I had no idea that was happening.
Yeah, everybody likes to focus on the actual situation, but the human element is always so fascinating to it. So for you, you must have been like, I'm sorry, did you say that what I described actually is part of the history of that particular apartment? Oh my gosh.
Absolutely. Yeah, it was really wild.
Okay, I'm glad that I swung back to the old Spidey sense because I flipped the page and I forgot to mark that one off. So thank you, sir.
No problem.
All right, next we have, and this one is on the tour, it's the Helmcken House.
Yes, Helmcken House. It's a weird one. It's right by the museum, and it's weird. It just feels weird. The whole thing feels weird. So it was the house of the very first doctor, who was in Victoria. He was a bigger deal than just a local doctor, though. He was one of the people sent to the nation's capital to bring British Columbia into Canada. So it was kind of a big deal. He also married the governor's daughter. That helps.
Yeah, that'll get you in pretty quick.
That'll get you in, yeah, for sure. He married his the governor's one daughter, and even lived very close to them. The Helmcken House is actually very close to the original governor's house, James Douglas's house. So yeah, it's got this crazy energy to it, and I didn't. I definitely felt the energy there, but the stories I got from that place was from other people who'd seen things and experienced things there. It was really cool.
I just wanted to bring up Dolly, and Dolly still hangs around there. And there was an actress who tried to get a part, and she said she could play the piano, but she really couldn't. But when it came time, Dolly actually seemed to help her out with that.
Yeah, and it was cool because this poor woman was practicing night and day just to try and play Silent Night. That was the song she was supposed to play to end the play, and she just couldn't do it. Like, it was not going to happen. And they're like, well, do your best, and they figured what they would do is the cast would sing extra loud and cover up the truly awful piano playing, and maybe nobody would notice. And as she went to put her fingers on the keyboard, boom, she played it flawlessly. And the cast were all looking at each other in like absolute astonishment. And it was perfect. And then everyone left, and she sat down to try and play it again. Nope, couldn't happen. But when the play was on, boom, it happened. And it happened every single performance.
How many performances did they have? I didn't write that down.
I think there was around 8 performances for that. They don't do it very long.
Yeah.
Right?
Love that part of the story. She's like, you're not going to screw this up in my house. Nope. Exactly.
And people have said the two things, why they think Dr. Helmcken and Dolly are still there is because they'll see a woman in a blue dress, very distinct perfume. And with Dr. Helmcken, he's always in the older part of the house. Because interestingly enough, the house is like an original log cabin, a kind of an in-between house, and then quite a modern house. And they're all stuck together. Because when Dolly said she would move in with her dad to take care of him, she's like, but I want electricity and I want a bathroom. And he's like, well, I don't. So she's like, fine. So they built on this whole other part. So Dolly lived in the kind of nice, new, modern part. Her dad stayed in the original cabin.
Freaking women, man. It's so needy. Golly. Lights and
Dad was happy in the house. Yeah, but no, Dolly wanted a flush toilet. He must have thought, where did I go wrong? My daughter's so soft.
Right? He's like, you don't want to crap in a bucket outside? What's your freaking problem? Gosh. Be an animal. It's all good. So this house now, obviously it's on your tour, but, I mean, does anyone live there part-time? Does anyone live there at all?
No. It's purely a museum piece now. It's really weird trying to get there when it's open. It's open at really weird times. They only open it during the summer, or unless, there's a play going on.
Yeah.
And any of the security guards I talked to there all very freely admitted that it was odd, that there was weird things that would happen there, noises and doors shutting and smells. And, yeah, they were pretty... It was treated as common knowledge, really.
I love the phantom smells aspect of any good ghost story. I mean, that could be 5 episodes in and of itself, is phantom smells.
Totally. Yeah, totally.
How about the furniture? Is there any original pieces that is included in Helmcken House?
Nobody really lived there after Dolly. There's a lot of original pieces.
Oh my gosh.
There.
Very cool.
They get left exactly where they were, so that's kind of cool.
All right, next. And this one is also on the tour. It is the Baird and Banker.
Oh, the Bard and Banker, yes.
Bard and Banker, yeah.
Yes. That's probably our longest ghost story on the tour, and it's so frustrating because it's on Government Street, which is the major tourist area. And you will be standing there with like 20 or 30 people, and you're trying to tell the story, and you've got cruise ships, shuttle buses going past, and drunk people stumbling past who are compelled to go, ooh, whenever they see a ghost. Like, really? Oh, that's so clever.
You're like, screw you. I mean, not out loud, but in your head, you're just saying all these expletives, I'm sure.
I just focus on telling the story, but I actually had one guy who was so drunk, and he literally stumbled into people as he was walking past.
Oh, goodness me.
And they were kind of looking, a little upset or and I said, he's been dead for 7 years. So then people feel a little less stressed about it.
That is incredible.
In a way, it's like live theater, right? Like, what are you going to do?
Yeah, dude, off the cuff. I love it. You're like, actually, he's not actually alive. Oh, you're lucky people. Bump right into a ghost right outside the Bard and Banker.
Exactly. Yeah, no, that's a great story. I love that story. He was a pretty famous guy. His name was Robert Service. He worked there as a banker. The bank was on the bottom floor. The top 2 floors were dormitories because, of course, there was no electricity. So these guys weren't just hired to give money to customers. They were also there as the bank security. They would live above the bank. They were each issued a pistol. Their job was to protect the money, essentially. And this guy loved to go to the pub as well when he wasn't working. So he would never come out of the bank and walk down the street. He would go all the way around the block and then go to the pub that was about 5 doors down. And the reason was he would do this because he was absolutely pathologically terrified of anything to do with death. He couldn't stand it. And the building right next door, that is still the original building right next door, not the original business, but the original building is still there, was the very first funeral parlor in Victoria. And he just, he wasn't going to go near it until one night, and it was literally a dark and stormy night. He headed out of the side door. He fought his way all the way around the block and got to the pub. But by the time he got out, the storm had worsened. It had been going on for a couple of days. And there were no streetlights or something like that. And he thought, there's no way I can brave the wind and the rain and get all the way around the block. I'm going to have to just walk up the street to the bank. So he headed up. And as he did, he happened to see the worst thing he could have seen. He saw, first of all, the door to the funeral parlor was slightly ajar. And even worse, there were 2 bobbing lights in the very back corner of the funeral parlor against the wall they shared with the bank. And this was not the first time people would break into a less secure building to get into the bank through a wall. So he sort of summoned up his courage. I don't know what his plan was. He knew he had to do something, and he stepped into the funeral parlor, and he began to inch his way forward. Again, it was pitch black in there, except for these 2 lights at the very back of the building. And he tripped on something, and he fell, and he landed on something kind of soft and damp and squishy. And he began yelling. And as he did, the 2 men from the back ran up towards the front of the store. And as they did, the light kind of illuminated the scene, and he discovered that not only was he within kissing distance of a corpse, a drowned man with his eyes open and his lips blue and his face very white. But he was surrounded by corpses of men and women and children. They'd all been on the SS Clallam, which was coming from Olympia, Washington, up to Victoria on its daily run. And in fact, they tried to get an entire flock of sheep onto the Clallam to transport them to Victoria. And for whatever reason, the sheep refused to get on the boat. Absolutely refused.
Oh, interesting. They knew, huh?
And so they said, you know what, we'll do it tomorrow. Not a big deal. And then the ship went down, and everyone perished. And the bodies were washing ashore in Victoria, and they didn't have enough places for them. So they were lying them out on the floor of the funeral parlor so people could come the next day and identify the dead. So he did not do well with this. He ended up going back to the bank and not sleeping. He had started a lifelong problem with him of insomnia. He very quickly realized he could not stay in the bank, in that bank, begged his boss for transfer. And his boss said, well, okay, there's one place we can send you, but you're not going to want to go. Mm-hmm. And try me. And so they said Dawson City in the Yukon needs a banker because they're having a gold rush. And he's like, I'm there. I'm gone. I'm out. Mm. So he took off. He got up there. He didn't, unfortunately, solve his sleeping problem. He was still an insomniac. Every time he shut his eyes, he said he could see that dead man's face. But he filled the nights with also writing poetry and became quite famous here in Canada. He wrote a poem called The Cremation of Sam McGee. He also wrote another one called The Shooting of Dan McGrew, which are both quite funny, but also completely obsessed with death. He made a lot of money doing it, retired to the south of France, did an interview with Harper's Bazaar magazine that wanted to do a story on the Wild West and the Gold Rush. Unfortunately, he had no interest. Robert had no interest in talking about that. He was only interested in talking about where he felt he became a poet. And that was that cold, rainy, stormy night in Victoria, where he landed face-to-face with a corpse. He passed away. The magazine did publish the article with pictures of Robert, both old and young. And a woman across the street was, she taught weaving in her apartment, and she was having issues. After Robert died, she would be all set to go to bed. She'd close the curtains, and there'd be a man standing on the second floor of the bank staring at her. And whenever she looked out during the night, she would see him every night staring at her. Her friends started to get worried about her. She phoned the police. The police said, no one's been up there. We checked it out. No one's been up there for years. Those rooms were abandoned. But she insisted she was seeing this man. Two of her friends came over and held a vigil, essentially. And they wanted to see where this man came from and where he went. And they saw him appear. But he didn't just, like, walk up to the window. He appeared like a light bulb turning on. And they were both like, whoa. But thankfully, one of them had seen the story in the magazine. She recognized him as Robert Service, the young Robert Service. And it's just another example of ghosts don't always haunt where they die. Sometimes they haunt where they have some kind of emotional attachment. And for Robert, this was a strong emotional attachment. The cool part was the people who were opening up the pub underneath came on the ghost walk, and they were looking for a name for the pub. And when they heard about it, they actually named it after Robert Service, the bard of the Yukon, as he was known, and the banker, the bard and the banker. And apparently he does every once in a while descend from upstairs. He comes down the stairs and disappears. So not as often, though. It's pretty loud in there.
Yeah, I love that story. And, I mean, it was horrible what happened to Robert. And I think the most striking thing for me, what we mentioned before about, you know, what happens to the experiencer. And after all these years, and like you said, he's a famous writer and a poet, and he's living somewhere else. And Harper's Bazaar comes out to interview him, and all he can talk about is that corpse and that dark and stormy night.
For him, he felt that was his birth. Yeah. Oh, that profoundly changed him after having that experience. So, yeah.
And like many of us, either you, like me, you watch Critters, and then you put all the stuffed animals around you or in bed with you, you know, or like you pull the covers over your head. Like that's whatever you do, either you don't sleep or, damn it, you find a way. Because covers 100%. And stuffed animals, they will protect you. Somehow. Yeah. I don't know how, but those fur balls with teeth, they don't like those stuffed animals, see?
No. You do what you got to do.
Works every time. Let's jump really quick to now this you said was your first ghostly experience in Victoria, and that is the Bishop's Chapel and the Diocese office.
Yes. That was a weird one. That was a bit of an emergent experience.
Yes.
We were going to be cleaning in there. I worked for the diocese, but my wife was between jobs at the time, and so she figured she'd do this just to fill some time in. And so we were going to be cleaning the office, and we were going to be cleaning, as part of it was the Bishop's Chapel, which was used as the archives for the diocese. She walked in there and basically turned around and came back out, and I said, "What's going on?" And this is someone who will tell you she doesn't sense anything. She's like, no, I don't know. There's no ghosts. It's all good. She came out and she goes, "I'm never going in there again. You're going to have to clean that part." And
You're
I'm like, well,
oh boy.
She's like, "I don't like it." Oh, okay. I went over there, definitely felt something quite angry, a very dark, I don't know, protective maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know, dark.
Yeah, you must have been like, there's a huge red flag if my wife is saying there's something going on here.
It was like walking into a building with a storm cloud over you. That's
wow.
sort of. And I had the weird experiences with the vacuum cleaner being unplugged while I was in the other room. And not just unplugged on the wall, but the plug was beside the vacuum in the center of the room. The chairs tipping over, I heard that a couple times. And I was mystified. And this is also kind of one of my first real times of opening myself up and saying, okay, what's here? What do you need? What can I do for you? What are you upset about? And it was a good thing because I was drawn to this plaque on the wall that I had never even noticed, and it was dedicated to a young man who had drowned while at college, and his parents had built this chapel in his name for the church. And there was actually a picture of him. It was a marble bust relief of him, and then there was actually a picture of him as well. And that was helpful to know the history a little bit, and it also kind of resonated. I don't know if that makes sense, but it kind of was like, oh, okay. You know what I mean? Like it was something that clicked. And so I ended up relaxing a little bit and then realizing, okay, if this is him, maybe now I know how to connect to it. So I did sort of just relax and let things happen, and things settled down, and I would say hello and goodbye to him when I would leave. And then one day I was in there, and I just, I kind of made peace with him by saying, "I'm not here to hurt you, I'm just here to clean," kind of thing. And then one day I was in there, and I was just felt compelled to sing an old hymn. It was like Old Rugged Cross or How Great Thou Art, or one of those kind of classic kind of hymns. And the chapel was a great place to do that because it had a very high rounded ceiling. So, I mean, you sound awesome, right? So
yeah.
I'm vacuuming away and dusting and just singing my full head off. And it was like the sun broke out of the cloud. I mean, the cloud was definitely less heavy once I started apologizing or saying hi or bye or whatever. But when I started to sing, the whole energy shifted. And within a few weeks even, I didn't even have to say hi or bye. It was like we were friends, you know, and he knew me. And I would often go in there and sing. Partly it made the time go quicker, and partly it was like I was able to give him something. I don't know what he needed, but it definitely felt like he was getting something from it. And as a result, the energy totally changed in there. It was really interesting.
So how about the part with the bishop's agoraphobic wife, who I think you wrote in there, like she was in there for like 19 years or something?
Yeah. So this was in the office. This was the other part of the building. And my office is in the basement, but I was often in the building. I did youth work, so I was in there on weekends a lot, getting stuff together. And what I noticed was if I was on the main floor of the 3 floors, I would hear footsteps above me walking around upstairs. And I go up there. Oh, someone else is here. I go up. There's nobody there. An alarm on the building, so I would have known if someone had come in or out. It would have chimed. Nothing. If I was in the basement, I would hear someone walking on the main floor. So it was always one floor above me. It was never below me. It was always above me. And yeah, I talked to one of the secretaries who'd been there for like 100 years. And the first time I brought it up, she was like, "I don't know what you're talking about." But I'd only been there a month or two.
Yeah.
I brought it up. I'd been there about 3 years. And I said, look, you're here by yourself. Do you ever feel like there's something else here? And she looked at me and she was like, you mean the footsteps? I'm like, ah. And then she was the one who told me, well, the bishop who was here for like 40 years, his wife developed agoraphobia. She didn't leave upstairs. They had servants, and she literally had to be carried out of the house when he retired from. Yeah. So, and then they demolished that house because it was in bad repair, and they built this sort of more modern office. It still looks very old timey, but it was built in '94, and apparently she's still attached to the land because she wasn't going anywhere.
and that's a long time, to say the least, to be somewhere for 19 years and literally have to be drugged out of there. And this is very cliche to ask, but I just wanted to ask you, I think it was enough just to have her there for 19 years and not want to leave and have all that obviously she's going through a lot, so that negative energy there. But did she actually die there?
No, she didn't die there. I believe they moved to a home in another part of Victoria. She didn't last long afterwards, but I think for her that was where she felt safe. And so she died. That's where she went back.
Wow.
Yeah. Powerful thing.
Yeah.
Attack. Very powerful.
That's a heck of a disorder to have.
Oh, yeah. Big time.
And I'm sure the bishop must have, again, the human element is just fascinating. I mean, what her side of it was, and then what his side of it was, and having to take care of her. Wow.
Oh, big time. While having to be a pretty high-profile public figure in the community at the time. It would be a lot. So, there was, I'm sure, a ton of emotion running around that house.
Have you been back there in a while?
No. I did go back there maybe 4 or 5 years ago. I had to pick something up, and I did end up going down to the basement and all of it, and I was like, oh, yeah, I remember this energy. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess to them it's pretty timeless.
Yeah.
However that works, we're not quite sure. I guess we'll find out if, that's how it works out. But yeah, pretty timeless. They don't get tired.
No, they don't. I mean, I think for them it would be such a huge deal. I mean, imagine you standing in a room for 10 years and you can see people come and go, and you try and talk to them, communicate, and no one sees you, and then you have someone come in and you try and communicate and they turn their head and look at you or hear you or something. I mean, that would be, it makes sense to me why they kind of glom onto people, because I just can't imagine the relief of making that connection. And the problem for us is we don't know who's there or what they're doing there. And I always say on the ghost story, if you're a nice person in life, chances are you're going to be a nice person in death. If you're an asshole in life, death seldom proves your disposition, right?
Yeah, you're just going to love to taunt and scare, and I mean,
and in control, right?
Right. Especially for someone like her. I mean, what a sad situation. I mean, our lives are quite short, and to have to spend it like that.
I know.
I don't. I mean, it sounds like besides the feelings in the building, it was just the footsteps, right? No one ever really heard any voices, or there was no tapping your hair pulling or anything like that going on from anybody.
All I ever heard was footsteps. I think in some ways she just wanted to be left alone. I can't imagine torment as a woman in that time frame, to not be able to do your public duties, and you know what I mean. Like, that would have been so intrinsically part of who she was. And married to the bishop, she knew what her role was, and to not be able to carry that out. Oh my God, the conflicting emotion must have been just like a hot tub. You know what I mean? Like the bubbling and the absolutely.
So she probably didn't even come down when he was conducting any of the services or anything, right?
Oh no, she didn't leave the house. Yeah, and the cathedral would have been next door. It would have been quite a walk away.
Right. It was completely separate. Yes.
Yeah.
Even worse. Then you have to go outside and go into another building.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's hard for us to grasp, but holy cow. Yeah, that story really jumped out at me, so I wanted to cover that one. Okay, so last but not least, if we could cover, because I just watched again recently the movie From Hell, which is, of course, about Jack the Ripper, And
Yeah.
say
What were
what
you
you
going to
will
talk
about
about?
Johnny Depp, but I happen to like that movie and anything having to do with Jack the Ripper. So I just wanted to talk to you about poor Agnes Bing and the
Yeah.
Delta Ocean Pointe Resort, and we'll kind of we'll culminate with that story.
Absolutely. It's a good one. Well, I mean, where the Delta Ocean Point Resort is now was to the rail yards. And it was, poor Agnes, she was one of the few people in that neighborhood because that was really, there were like 12 buildings there and there were over 24 brothels and saloons in those 12 buildings. Like we're talking multi-layered party palace kind of thing. But Agnes had one of the few legitimate businesses in the area. She ran a bakery because her husband was very sick. And so Agnes and her brother ran the bakery. And her husband was pretty clear about how he wanted her to come home. She had three choices to get home from the bakery. She lived across the water in Victoria West. There's a bit of a kind of a harbor that runs in, and there was a streetcar. It turned out to be an ill-fated streetcar. If you read the book, you'll know what I'm talking about, the one over the Point Ellis Bridge. But Agnes would take the streetcar. It ran past the shop. She'd get on the streetcar and go home. If she missed the streetcar, it was the last one. She would then have to walk about 5 or 6 blocks up, all the way across the inlet, and then to her home. It would take her probably 45 minutes to an hour to walk that. The other option that, of course, she was not supposed to use was what was commonly referred to as the shortcut. And it was literally just train tracks that ran across a trestle over the gorge that would let the train come into downtown. There was no sidewalk. There was no nothing. It was literally just these tracks. And there was more than one drunken sailor who was trying to get back to the base after a night of drinking and wandered off and fell in the water, and that was the end of him. So it seems that Agnes one night, it was a dark and rainy night, which would make sense. She would want to take the shortcut and not do the full route. I mean, it would cut her time in half to go over the train tracks. And so she set out that night to cross the train tracks. We only know that because when the police were making inquiries, there were witnesses who had seen her go. Unfortunately, that's the last time anyone saw her alive. She didn't come home. Her husband was quite worried. He summoned the police. They went over to where her business was because she had a legitimate business. That was the only reason. If she'd been one of the more distributable businesses, they probably wouldn't have bothered, but she was a business owner. Talked to witnesses, found out where she'd gone, assumed, oh, okay, we're going to be pulling her out of the water. She fell in and drowned. Began to go across the the train tracks bridge and ended up in the rail yards. There they noticed, it was around 5 o'clock in the morning, first light kind of thing, 5:30, and they noticed a tree covered in crows, and the crows were swooping down and swooping back up. In the police business, they call that a clue. So they headed over for that tree, and they found Agnes, unfortunately. And really unfortunately, she'd been cut from her pubic bone right up to her throat. She had had her ribs cracked open and her internal organs were set around her body almost ritualistically. And she'd been strangled. Of course, 11 years earlier, there had been a very famous set of murders, as you alluded to, Jack the Ripper. And this was very, very similar. So the press was, of course, completely restrained in their coverage with headlines like Ripper in the New World and Walks Among Us. And there is a theory that he did emigrate to the United States or to Canada. Nobody really knows. The States and Canada were a lot easier to commit murders in because there was such a great landmass and so few people, you could move very easily between one area to another. Anyway, this was the theory that it was Jack the Ripper. It sent the city into a panic for 6 weeks. Women did not go out alone. The police followed up lots and lots of clues. They even brought in a psychic, which for the 1800s, they must have been pretty hard up. The psychic, of course, super helpful by telling the press, he's killed before and he'll kill again. So that really calmed everybody down.
Yeah, that helps. Thank you.
To this day, her murder is unsolved. Another murder like it did not happen ever again in Victoria. But the interesting thing was when they began to build, or before they began to build, actually, the rail yards, you could see them from downtown. And people would often see a gray, shadowy figure walking around over there. It looked like a woman in a dress. And she was quite common. Everyone knew it was Agnes. It was not, ooh, what's that? Everyone knew who. Because it was the rail yards, no one was too worried about it. She wasn't bothering anybody. But eventually, they were going to build a hotel there. And when they started building, they noticed that there was one spot in the lobby where people would experience some very upsetting symptoms. They would experience their heart racing, sweating, feeling like they couldn't breathe, almost like a panic attack. But when they moved out of that spot, the feelings went away. They also noticed the power tools would drain, the battery packs on power tools would drain right away. Like just walking through it, the battery pack would drain. And everyone just sort of avoided that one spot. When they were having the grand opening of the hotel, one of the men up on the dais looked out on the crowd who were there for the big opening ceremonies and noticed that there was one spot where people just seemed to quietly and slowly shuffle out of the way. So they ended up with kind of this 6 foot by 5 foot rectangle on the floor of the lobby where nobody was in. And this lobby was packed, but nobody was standing in that spot. And now people experience the same things. They experience that feeling of panic, the heart racing, all those sorts of things. But now it's cell phones that drain. We were telling this story on one of our tours, and this woman got really excited. You asked about, how often do people tell me their stories? Well, this one couldn't wait. And she said, oh my God, I'm staying there, and my cell phone was fully charged. I went down into the lobby for breakfast, and when I looked at my phone, it was dead, and I haven't gotten it to turn on again. It won't even recharge. So it's like, cool.
Yes, yeah.
And that happens quite a bit on our tours. We often get confirmation from people who have no idea. A lot of times they're not even on the tour. They'll see us and they'll come up and go, excuse me, is there a story about my hotel? Because, so that's kind of awesome.
Yeah.
But, so Agnes now, apparently that was the spot where Agnes was found. And so people are most likely experiencing her final moments. And then she is sometimes seen still wandering around outside on the rock. So, yeah, Agnes is still with us, still waiting for justice.
Yeah, still trying to get home. It's such a sad story, and it's easy to read these and detach yourself. But there's a real person at the end of the story, and that's why it's
Absolutely.
in the books, right? And
writing the book, yeah.
Yeah.
Right, different than just telling the stories. Because when you're doing the research, you see these people's pictures.
Yeah.
Right? You find out about their family. And it's not difficult to imagine what her poor husband went through that night. And then to discover she'd been murdered. I mean, what do you do when that happens? The story in the book about the Point Ellis Bridge, all those people dying in one fell swoop on a holiday-long weekend. Ugh. One of the biggest tragedies to ever hit Victoria. Yeah. There was no one in Victoria who didn't know someone who had lost someone or had lost someone themselves. It was huge. So yeah, these things hit the community hard, and definitely had a price. And I hope I was respectful enough in there. I mean, I do inject humor. That's just who I am. But, I definitely wanted to get across the point that these were people, who lived and loved and, danced and cried and ate family dinners and had crappy days. And, they're just regular people.
No, you absolutely did. And something else that came to mind, especially because you brought up the whole, could it be the Ripper in the New World, like the headlines claimed? And I'm just thinking, for some random person to kill that in that way, so specifically, I mean, very gory isn't even the word. I don't even know what you call that. And not to do it again. It's so very strange. I mean, even her organs were, sitting outside of her body in a certain way. And it's so ritualistic that you're like thinking, I mean, back then they must have been like, oh my God, we're going to have to be waiting for this next week because this is a truly sick person. But it never happened again.
Well, it didn't. And the interesting thing is he could have jumped on a boat to Seattle, which ran daily from Victoria, and murdered there. But nobody would ever have heard about it.
That is
right?
true.
Like,
that is true.
We have to remember how connected we are now.
Yeah.
Even like 30 years ago, we were connected the way we are now. Because now you can put in, here's this murder that happened. These are all the hallmarks of it. The computer will make those connections, right? But for these people, if he murdered in Olympia or Seattle, they wouldn't even known about it.
Yeah,
So it's really interesting.
Poor Agnes. I was reading that, and I was like, oh my God, here's just this hardworking lady trying to get home after a long day,
Yeah.
and thinking of this poor woman just eternally searching for, her home or her husband, or, or you hear these stories about the kids wandering places, and you're like, oh my goodness me, it's terrible.
Yeah, I know.
Still a great read, though.
Yeah, no, it is a good story, but it is very sad.
All right. Well, I'm not going to poke and prod you for anymore because everyone else needs to buy the book and read the rest. So Ian, what's next for you besides a busy schedule with the Ghost Walks? What do you have coming up?
You know what? Doing the podcast, doing the ghost walks, doing some special kind of Halloween reading type things, obviously, given the nature of the book. I would love to do another one. It has been so much fun to do. It's been great. And I have loved it when people take pictures of the book from where they are and send them to me. I love that. That's so fun. So it got put on the ferries, which is a big deal around here.
Yeah.
Because you have these full ferries that go back and forth from the mainland, kind of on the hour, every hour from 6 o'clock in the morning to 10 o'clock at night. And they have put it in all their gift shops on the boats. And it's the perfect place for it because you've got people who are coming to Victoria and are looking for something a little different rather than just drinking tea and looking at flowers. And the bill, right? So that was really exciting.
Yeah. You'll have to think of a place where here in Vegas that I can take your book, which is sitting right next to me while we talk, and I can take a picture. Maybe it's going down the roller coaster at the New York, which looks like it needs a paint job and maybe a few nuts and bolts tightened. But hey, I'll do it. I'll do it for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm going to be in Vegas between Christmas and New Year's.
Oh my goodness! You let me know. I will come out and meet you.
That would be awesome. That'd be really fun.
Yes. That's a good thing about being here. I will say, I don't go to the Strip much. I'm not a big partier. I'm a pretty quiet person, like to read and, doing the quote-unquote nerdy things. But if someone's in town, I'm like, tell me where you are. I will come there in a heartbeat. Yes.
Yeah, no, that's really cool. And you can't really go on the Strip more than 3 days, I think. Otherwise, it starts to change your brain chemistry. But
yeah. Yeah, you do. You become a werewolf almost, I think, if that's...
You do, but it's definitely one of those places where you're like, wow, this is for real.
Yeah. You're like, this sucks. There's so many other really cool things to do that are away from the Strip, that I try to reiterate that to everyone. They're like, oh my God, do you live in a hotel? Or I'm like, sweet Jesus, no. I don't even go down there. There's libraries here and schools and oh my God, I have a grocery store. What?
People do the same thing when they come here though, right?
Yeah.
It's like short gardens and whale watching.
Exactly.
No, that's not all there is to do. I get why you want to do it. But...
Ian, you don't make money whale watching? What the hell, dude?
Well, someone's making a lot of money whale watching, but it isn't me.
Or if you're in Seattle, you work in a coffee shop, and you're like, yeah, dude, I'm a freaking millionaire. I work in a coffee shop. Mm-hmm. I throw fish, and I work in a coffee shop. That's what we do.
Coffee shop and go up and down the Space Needle. That's pretty much all there is to
and
do.
You're a pothead automatically, even though that was 20 years ago. Whatever.
Yeah, I know. It's pretty funny. I do like Seattle. It's a great city.
Oh,
but,
I love that place.
Yeah.
I miss it. I used to live in Kent for a few years, and then I would commute into Seattle, which is technically it's 15 miles. But if you drive it on the way there, and I had a very 9 to 5 job. On the way there, it took me an hour. On the way home, 15 miles, people, 2 hours at least. People, they don't believe me.
It's too small for that. So yeah, it's not like that. But Vancouver's not bad.
I miss Seattle though. I miss a lot about Seattle. So I'm sure I would love Victoria. It would probably remind me exactly of Seattle, just on a smaller scale, like you said.
A smaller, cuter scale. Yeah.
All right, so I can't let you go. You have to do all the plugs, plug Ghost Walks, plug where to find your fine book, and of course any social media stuff and the podcast.
Wow, yeah. Facebook, I'm on Facebook just as Ian Gibbs, author. You can reach me there. Also, of course, ghoststoryguy@gmail.com, because that was my original thing, it was going to be Ghost Story Guy, and then I was like, ooh, this would be good for a podcast, so that kind of grew.
Yeah.
The podcast, of course, again on Facebook as well, the Ghost Story Guys. We also have a website, ghoststoryguys.com. And then Ghost Walks, just check out ghostlywalks.com. And you can buy tickets there. You can see what the schedule is. And if you would like to come to Victoria and have a ghost walk with me, please let me know in lots of time, and I'll see what I can arrange, because that would be really fun to meet people who are interested in this stuff more than just, we need something to do after dinner. And yeah, I mean, it's all out there. The book, of course, is on Amazon.com, Kindle version and paperback, so whatever floats your boat. And I don't know what else to say. That's all that's going on right now.
I won't bleep that part out. See, I'm a little bigger than Brennan when it comes to that. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh man, no, I love you both. I love your show. I'm all caught up. So I mean, come on, let's record the next one, because I need some entertainment.
He's in some godforsaken BC interior town right now. Otherwise, we'd be recording
that
tonight.
Is no excuse.
I know. Pretty bleak.
I mean, look at tonight. Skype has just been like spectacular. I've been bashing it, and I've been using something else. And now look tonight. It's been incredible. No drop calls and no
weird
broken conversations. So I think Skype's just being like, hey, Shannon, shut the up, because we're also here. Show me.
I'm glad it worked.
Yeah. Well, hey, Ian, thank you so much. And if you want to come on any time, if you have something going on with the Ghost Walk or anything that you want to promote, or if there's like, hey, I'm writing a new